All right, welcome back to the Big Texas Podcast presented by Texas Young Republicans. I am your host, Jordan Overturf, coming to you after what has to be the biggest bungling of a Democratic primary in history. I mean, this tops, McGovern's fumbling of his VP pick against Nixon in 72. This way exceeds the embarrassment of HD 28 and the promises, the over promises made by Democrats there to take over that seat. I don't know. As we look at this, Republicans have to be feeling pretty good about the disarray, the disorganization of the Democratic Party at large, but we must not let that distract us from the work we are trying to do here in Texas. If we are going to keep Texas red, we need to band together, make sure we are working together as a party to advance Republican candidates up and down the ballot. That includes my guest today. Ryan Krause is running in Texas District 15. He is a strong conservative. We talk a lot about, important issues related to border security, healthcare, his experiences working in a business along the border, and just going out talking to voters about the issues they truly care about, the things that they are going to be discussing, debating in their decision about who they're going to vote for in 2020. I had a great time talking to Ryan, and I think you'll really enjoy this. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Mr. Ryan Krause. How's it been going for you out there, Ryan?
It's been going really well. Thank you for asking. We've got a great campaign team that we're saturating this district really, really well, and we're meeting some incredible people along the way. So we've had the opportunity to go door to door and talk to people, and then some of our forums and our meet and greets. We've had great response from people, and getting to hear people and their stories and their concerns has just been a great process. We've enjoyed it.
So tell me a bit about this district. What makes it special, and what kind of inspired you to get involved in this race?
Great, yeah. Well, it's a really interesting district actually. It goes from Seguin, Guadalupe County, all the way down to the Rio Grande Valley. It's a long, thin strip. Some people call it the Fajita District, which is funny. It's a very diverse district. You have Hispanic culture, which is obviously the influence in the southern end of the district, and then you have German culture, actually, which is the northern end of the district. And so very, very different cultures at both ends of the district. And so that's one of the reasons where I feel like I'm uniquely qualified. I grew up on the north end of this district. My family's been on the north end of this district for generations and generations. And then I got to move to the McAllen Mission area in 2007. And my wife and I own a business where we do executive coaching and leadership development. And we still have a lot of clients down in the valley. So we know both ends of this district well, and the specific needs and the hurts and the pains and what people are expecting from their congressman on both ends. And so it's a very diverse district with very different needs at both ends, but we feel like we have a pretty good grasp on those needs.
So obviously having a business and growing up in this district gives you a unique perspective. But what else about your background and experience do you think has prepared you to get into this race?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, my dad was career Navy, 26 years in the Navy. My mom was a civil service employee all her life. My brother is actually the county judge of Comal County, and I've got another brother who's an entrepreneur. But as you can see, civil service and serving people really runs in my blood. And so I've been an entrepreneur all my life too. But in 2007, when I moved to the Valley, it was to serve people. I worked at a large church down in the Valley as the executive pastor. And all in the name of serving people. And so left there in 2015, where my wife and I started our business, where that's exactly what we do. We go into organizations and we serve people. And so when we meet with business owners and CEOs and presidents, one of the things that we tell them is we're going to talk to your people about a lot more than just their business life. We're going to talk about their personal life. We're going to talk about their business life. We're going to talk about their spiritual life. We're going to talk about their financial life, because we believe that there's a whole person. And the better the person is, the better the company is. So, that's what we've done. That's who we are. We build people. We have the unique opportunity to, we partner with the John Maxwell team. John Maxwell was called the #1 leadership expert in the world by Inc. magazine because he's written so many books on leadership. He wrote the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, which a lot of people are familiar with. But we get to partner with him and go to foreign countries and work with the leadership and the government there. And so we get to train these values-based leadership principles to foreign governments. And so, yeah, I've really enjoyed that.
Now, building people is an interesting choice of phrase. How do you think you can do that at the, from the political side of things?
It's tough, but yeah, it's about relationships.
Okay.
And so I think that I've been very, very good. God's blessed me with the ability to build relationships, and people trust me. I have a character and the demeanor about me that people trust me, and so I don't approach relationships with an agenda like what can you do for me. I approach a relationship with what value can I add to you. And,
are you sure you're running in politics?
Well, exactly, right? That's the struggle I had. And I have a really strong faith life, and I feel like God called me to this. And when I first felt the calling, I was questioning God. Are you sure you're talking to the right guy? And so, yeah, but because of that, I feel like I'm again uniquely qualified to be able to build these relationships. I've already got relationships in DC, and I already have seen how it works, and honestly how it doesn't work in DC. And so I think that I've got a good start and the opportunity to go there and actually make a real difference.
So from the leadership perspective, what do you think this district needs most right now?
Actually, honestly, if you would have asked me that question 2 months ago, there's lots of things I would have talked about. I would have talked about border security. I would have talked about immigration. I would have talked about healthcare. I would have talked about the economy. But after going door to door, as I mentioned earlier, after talking to people face to face and hearing concerns, it's all about communication. So many people in this district feel like they don't have a voice. They've called their current representative's office over and over and over again. And I honestly don't know Vicente Gonzales well. I haven't met him face to face, so I can't say anything about him. But what I can say is there's a lot of people out there that don't feel like they have a voice. And so one of the first things I want to do is set up open lines of communication. I mean, that's things that we do in organizations to where the executive team can actually hear the ground level employees. And so that's something I want to do with this campaign is create an infrastructure where people's voices are heard and they feel like they have real representation.
Wow, an undercover boss for the congressional set.
There you go.
There's a unique perspective. So as you go out and you're knocking on doors, you're going out to events throughout the district, what are some of the issues that are coming up most as you're talking to voters?
Well, some of those things that I mentioned, border security in the Valley is obviously a really big one. Mm-hmm. So we've talked to a lot of people about border security, and honestly, that's one of those things that really infuriates me because it's politics that's stopping us from moving forward there. And so, I mean, we've obviously made some strides. We've obviously made things better, but in talking to the agents on the ground, talking to the people that are doing the job and standing in harm's way, their frustrations are that the policy changes. I mean, every couple of weeks they show up to work and it's like, okay, well, what is the policy today? And the other thing is funding. They have. I've heard of cars that are not working because one specific scenario is there was a $200 part that was needed for a car and the car is sitting on a lot, and so agents are driving 2 and 3 to a car just because they're not getting their cars fixed. The other thing is night vision goggles. I just sat with the Border Patrol Council, and they were telling me that they're using these old, dilapidated hand-me-downs from the military of 20, 30 years ago. And so they're not getting the equipment that they need to do their job safely and effectively. And so that's a big one on the border. When you go to the northern end of the district, it's mostly about water. Mm-hmm. It's water quality. It's the lakes being sustained. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of people in DC that are even aware of the problem, and that's got to change because it's a big issue to the people who are living in the northern end of this district.
Well, and talking about water at the state level is a difficult conversation to have, and when you get to the federal level, if you dig into history, it seems like water was the number one thing that people talked about, especially in dividing up the states. But I guess so much of the conversation gets looped into climate change and distractions and things like that.
Exactly. And again, it becomes a political battle rather than meeting the real effective need.
Excellent. Well, as someone who enjoys solutions and actually solving problems, I'm excited about you getting a chance to go up there. Why get into politics right now? I mean, everything's so divisive. Why choose this is the time to step up to the political plate?
Well, to be honest, it's because I can't sit on the sideline. I've been an athlete all my life, and it's always difficult when you're a top performer and you get pulled out to sit on the sideline and watch. And so it's always a difficult situation. And in this situation, it's a very similar feeling. Like, I feel like I've got some solutions. I feel like I can make some progress and move things in the right direction. And I just can't sit and listen to the radio or watch TV anymore and watch our country go the direction that it has in the past. I'm thankful that we've made a lot of changes and we're doing a lot of good things right now. But I believe that our party needs the appropriate support or the adequate support in D.C. to continue moving this agenda forward.
Now, as we get ready for the census and all that comes with it, Texas is now in a position where it's looking to gain 3 more seats, right, which obviously won't affect this election cycle. But what do you think, if elected, you could do to help put Texas on a better footing in D.C. to be a stronger part of the conversation of what's happening at the federal level?
Well, again, that comes down to relationships, and I feel like I've have strong ability in that area where I can create relationships. As far as adding new seats, it comes with bringing people into Congress that we are, myself included, that when I get there, that there's adequate support, there's adequate training, there's again, I have relationships there that would be more than willing to bring me along and help me in the direction that we need to go, to where I can also support them, because we have some very conservative, very strong representatives in D.C. right now. We just need more of them. We need more people with Christian values, people that represent the values that not only represent this district, because that's the big issue, is that this district's not being represented in the values that we have. I'll come back to that. But creating those relationships in D.C. that represent these values and have the ability to move these values forward. It comes down to values. And the reason I say that is that, especially in the Rio Grande Valley, is that it's been a Democrat stronghold for years and years and years, and it's a generational thing. There's a lot of people that vote Democrat that, my experience talking face-to-face with people, they don't even know why they vote Democrat. Well, my dad did, and my grandfather did, and I'm a conservative Democrat, and I asked them, do you know what that means? Mm-hmm. And there's usually not a strong response to that. But when I ask simple questions like, well, do you believe that the family is an important unit, an important family unit? Absolutely. I mean, the Rio Grande Valley believes that family is important. When I ask them about gun control, you don't dare try to take a gun away from a family in the Hispanic-based Rio Grande Valley. When I ask about abortion, that's really an interesting scenario, mm-hmm, because there's people that go out and march against abortion, but then they vote for a Democrat representative who has an A+ rating with Planned Parenthood. Yeah. And so it's these values that we've got to get the message out, and we have some very strong strategic plans to get that message out during the general election. And so getting that message out and actually supporting the values that this district very, very strongly stands for is really what our core is all about.
Now, you keep mentioning the values of this district. What are those values, and how do you feel they're not being represented currently?
Well, it's just that. For me, it comes down to faith, family, and freedom. It's as simple as that. I have a very strong faith life. I believe that God comes first. I believe that Amen. That this country was founded on godly principles, and I believe that we have a left agenda that's trying to erase all that, that's trying to erase our history, that's trying to say that, well, the founding fathers weren't really Christian, and any one of us can have our life dissected, and we've done or said something along the way that somebody could question our character, if you will, or our faith values. Mm-hmm. But the fact is that this country was founded on Christian principles, and I believe that we should have the freedom and liberty to worship our Creator in any way that we see fit. And I want to remove anything that would hold us back from that. And I think that President Trump has done a great job at addressing some of those concerns. As far as family goes, I believe very strongly that as the family goes, this country goes. Mm-hmm. And there's so many policies in place that honestly destroy the family, abortion being the number one thing. Mm-hmm. We don't know the impact. We can talk about 60 million abortions since 1973, but we don't know the impact that's had on the hundreds of millions of people that are affected by those abortions. Not mm-hmm. only the babies that were not born, the dreams that were not realized, the lives that were not seen, but the millions and millions and millions of people that were affected by that abortion. We can't measure that. And so that destroys the family. And then as far as freedom goes, I get really upset, and it it riles me up to think about somebody's opportunity or somebody's hope or dream being crushed by somebody else, by somebody being oppressed and kept from realizing their dreams. And so I think that we have a lot of things in our government right now, in our society right now, that are holding people back from accomplishing everything that they want to accomplish. And so that's where I talk about values.
So do you think it's lacking in the current representation, or is that more of an institutional failure at the federal level?
Both.
Okay.
I think it is an institutional failure. I think that as a country, our values have suffered because we've allowed a certain agenda and certain principles out there to continue, and we've allowed those voices to speak louder than any others, and that's where we have to stand up, and I can no longer sit on the sideline. I've got to get in the fight. But I also think that our current representative, and again, I'm not saying anything about his character or who he is, but I know what he has voted for, and I know that he has an A+ rating with Planned Parenthood, and I know that he's made statements that there's no crisis on the border when the people living down there have seen it firsthand, when our Border Patrol agents have witnessed it and dealt with it firsthand. There's just he seems out of touch with a lot of things that are happening right now.
Well, and going back, you said you started your business down there in the Valley in 2007?
15, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So since that time, what have you kind of witnessed from your own perspective as a business owner in terms of the relationships on the border, what's happening in these towns? And, how do you deliver that message clearly without some of the rhetoric that kind of gets tossed in with this argument?
Well, it comes down to truth. I mean, truth stands up. Truth will be known. At the end of the day, truth will stand out. And so it's getting that message out. And again, some of the things that we've seen is the fear. We know that there's a left agenda that tries to motivate us with fear, and we've got to get past that. There's whole areas in the valley, in the Rio Grande Valley. I lived in one of them where the home values went down, where housing areas were somewhat being abandoned, because of fear, because they felt like, well, the cartel's taken over this area, and the reality was it was just fear, and so we've got to get the message out and overcome that, and stand up for the truth and let the truth be known, and let people see what reality is.
So what is a specific issue that you yourself feel passionate about and you're going to take with you should you get elected?
Oh, there's lots of them. I think the biggest one that I'm facing right now, and the reason I come to this one is because it has grown exponentially since getting into this race, and that's abortion. I've never liked it. I was marching in San Antonio back in the early '90s when we'd line up San Pedro with anti-abortion marches and so forth. So I've never been for abortion, but it's been more and more been more and more in my face just these last few months, where I'm seeing the devastation of it. And again, the dreams that are not realized, the lives that are not lived are a big deal to me, but seeing the impact and the people that are living with the pain of abortion, and seeing 40-year-old women that had an abortion 25 years ago that are still suffering from that consequence. The surprise to me has been the men who asked their girlfriend in high school to have an abortion, and they're still living with the pain of that abortion. It's an enormous problem that I don't think that we're paying enough attention to.
I know at the state level, there's been, big pushes. The president just last week, was the first president ever to speak at a rally for life. Do you think that we are going to come to a point where the Supreme Court is going to have to revisit Roe?
I do. I think that that's going to be sooner than later. I think that we've got state governments that are taking such a hard stand on it that the Supreme Court's going to have to reevaluate it. And so, I mean, science is telling, and I'm not one to vie for science, but science is telling us that life begins at conception. And so we can't deny that. I mean, we have a constitutional right given by God, not by our Constitution, not by our founders, but given by God, that we have a constitutional right to life. And to say that life starts at conception, the Supreme Court is going to have to recognize that and say, well, we can't rule in favor of abortion when life begins at conception. And so I think that's a big issue that's going to be overturned.
Have you come across any constituents that have an issue that maybe caught you by surprise, or that you hadn't thought about initially that you've begun to chew on a little bit?
Well, going back to the communication thing was big, but you know, I seem to keep coming back to this. I think one of the most powerful stories that I heard on this campaign trail was actually a young lady that I knew beforehand, and I heard parts of her story, but I asked her to introduce me at one of my meet and greets, and she got up and shared the story of her life, where her mother was a teenager in the Rio Grande Valley. She got in a car accident and suffered brain damage, and then being a brain damaged young lady, she then was raped and became pregnant.
Wow.
Her doctor told her parents, you need to have an abortion. She needs to have an abortion. The parents agreed with the doctor. He's the medical expert. Mm-hmm. But this young lady in the Rio Grande Valley said, no, I'm having my baby. I don't know if I can say this with a straight face. So the young lady had her baby. Marie was born. Marie became just another person in the Rio Grande Valley, was working her job, became a great worker, became a great sales rep, the number one sales rep for a pharmaceutical company, a medical supplies company. She got fired because of a personality difference with the owner. And instead of going home and sitting on the couch and feeling sorry for herself and collecting unemployment, she went to some of her top clients. She got them together. She went back and she bought the company that fired her. That's the American story. That's the American dream that would not have happened if that young lady with brain damage who was raped in the Rio Grande Valley had listened to the doctor and her parents and had an abortion.
Yep.
That's the American dream. That's the hope that I want to stand up for.
Excellent. Well, that's an amazing story.
It is, yeah.
So as you look down the road here, March 3rd is not that far away. Right. You know, primary voters are getting out. What's the message that you think voters are clinging to most right now? What is the thing that they're truly active on?
I think the economy is big. I think that people are seeing the economy and seeing the benefit, regardless of everything that's going on, regardless of what the mainstream media is telling us. The real people on the ground who are going to work 9 to 5 each and every day are seeing that their paychecks have gone up. They're having less taken out in taxes. They're able to buy more, provide for their families better. They're able to live better. And I think that people are experiencing that, and people are going to come out stronger than the media wants us to believe. I think they're going to come out in favor of our president and in favor of people who will take these same values to Washington and fight for their freedom to continue that lifestyle.
Do you think the Trump effect will push back the blue wave, or do you think that there is something else Republicans are going to have to do to ensure victory in 2020?
Well, just like I think two parts. Number one, the Republicans have to stand up. Christians have to stand up. You talked about another surprise. You talked about surprise. Another surprise was to be told that 25% of Christians vote. I thought, there's no way. That can't be true. And I've researched and I've looked, and that's absolutely true. That means 75% of the people who sit in pews or sit at church on Sunday morning are not going to the polls and voting for the direction of this country. It's not that they're staying out of politics. It's not that they're going, we don't want to get wrapped up in all that. It's that they're not determined. They're taking an active choice to not determine the direction of our country. And so that was a surprise to me. And that's where I think that as a Republican, as conservatives, we have got to get out to the polls and vote. And we can't diminish that no matter what. We cannot diminish that. But secondly, the second part of that question, I think, again, we go back to fear. I think that the left has set up fear tactics over and over and over and over again. Just in my lifetime, I can sit here and name areas where the left has created all this fear scenario. Remember the Y2K issue where the world was going to end?
Yeah.
I remember in the 80s when by 2020 we would be overpopulated. We could not sustain the growth that we were going through, and by 2020 we would be overpopulated and couldn't feed the people in the world. And it's 2020. Mm-hmm. And so these fear tactics just happen over and over and over again. And I think what we're experiencing right now is that this big blue wave is really just a ripple. And there will be loud voices. There will be hardcore activists that are making it a big deal and trying to get out there. But the reality is that it's not as big as they want us to think it is.
Well, it's funny you bring up Y2K. Apparently, it took 20 years for it to truly wreak havoc on computers. I was just reading the other day that whatever fix they came up with in the late 90s only kicked the can down the road to 2020, and it has now started to mess with some outdated computers that haven't been fixed for the new millennia still.
Well, there's some databases that the 4-digit date wasn't working well in, and to be honest, a lot of that was negligence because, like you just said, people have had 20 years to fix that problem and they just ignored it. But those are databases that did not have the proper tools necessary to make the change.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, here's your opportunity to speak directly to the voters in this district. What is your message to them? Why should they support you for this race?
Yeah, the message is faith, family, and freedom. Is we've got to stand up for faith. We've got to get back to the core values that created this country, that made this country great. And the left has just recently, just a couple months ago, have not unanimously, but overwhelmingly voted to be the party of the non-religious. They're doing everything they can to take God out of our country, and we've got to stand up and fight. And so we've got to get back to our faith roots. We got to stand up for the family, because as the family goes, this country will go. And the family is the core unit of this country, and we've got to bring that back. And we're all better when we grow up in a home that has a supportive and loving family. And then we've got to fight for our freedoms, because the left is constantly trying to take those freedoms away and cause us to not be everything that we can be. We're better. I was in Israel when where they're growing vegetables in the middle of the desert. Why? Because they don't have any other choice. And when we're told that, well, we're going to take care of your health care and we're going to eliminate your student debt, you just don't have to thrive, you don't have to strive, you don't have to work hard. We're going to take care of you. We're not good for that. We're not better for that. And so we've got to get rid of those ideas so that we are free to be everything that we were created to be, because we were created pretty awesome. And so we've got to get back to that. Where I think that I'm different is my core value, who I am is creating relationships and building people. God put on my heart years ago to help people to be better than they ever thought they could be. And so that's where I think I'm different, where I can create relationships and move things forward.
Excellent. Well, that's a worthy mission to be pushing for. For folks who want to find out more about you or your campaign, what's the best way to do that?
Ryan Krause for Congress.com. That's RyanKrause for Congress.com.
Excellent. Social media, any of that stuff?
Yeah, we're on Facebook, Ryan for Freedom. And the easiest thing to do is go to my website, and all the links are right there.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and we look forward to hopefully being able to bring you back before the general in November.
Thank you so much, Jordan.
All right. Thank you again to Ryan for joining us. If you want to reach him, you can go to his Facebook, Ryan Krause for Freedom. Or you can go to his website, Ryan Krause for Congress. That's FOR Congress. You can also reach him on email, Ryan@ryanforfreedom, 4, ryanforfreedom.com. Thank you again to Ryan. Thank you to all our candidates. We've bypassed 1,000 streams of this show. We appreciate all the guests who have come on. If you want to follow our activities, see what guests we've had on, or go back and listen to old episodes, you can subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. There are a ton of platforms that we're out there. If we're not on your platform, let us know, and we will work to remedy that. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Big Texas Podcast. Make sure you are following the Texas Young Republicans and all of our efforts on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Texas YRs. Thank you again. I cannot say how much I appreciate all of you for taking part, helping connect me with candidates, pushing this out, supporting it. We've got to do everything we can to keep Texas red in 2020. So thank you for doing your part. I will continue to do my part. And until then, friends, we'll see you down the road.